Stephen Bedard, and I want to talk to you about why I love history. And not just why, but 5 reasons why I love history. Now, I'm not a trained historian, although my original plan was to do my undergrad in history. I actually applied and was accepted into the history program. But at the very last minute, I thought, what kind of job am I going to get with a history degree? Now, it ends up I could have gotten a lot of different jobs with a history degree. I ended up going with a business degree, which I still didn't get a job in the business world, so it didn't really matter. But anyways, I loved history. When I got to seminary, some of my favorite courses were in church history. And in fact, the only really award that I got in seminary was for historical theology. And so it was something that really clicked with me. So I'm going to share with you 5 reasons why I love history. One is that we can learn from the mistakes of the past. Sometimes people are discouraged by what we read about in history, the terrible things that have happened. And this includes the history of the church as well. We've done a lot of really bad things over the centuries, whether it is the Inquisition or the Crusades or whatever. We can look at the mistakes of the past and we can learn from that. So often Christians will look at those things and say, well, those weren't real Christians, and so we can just ignore that. But I don't think that that's helpful. I think it is more helpful for us to look at what happened and say, okay, why did that happen? How can we prevent that from happening again? So that's good for us whether we are in the church or outside of the church. We need to learn from history. A second reason is that we can learn from the successes of the past. There are good things that have happened in history. We can see the people that worked to eradicate slavery. That was an amazing event, a series of events that took place. And so we can look at that and we can learn, how did they do that? How did they go about it? How did they find the support? How did they change people's minds? How did they face the economic ramifications to that kind of thing? So we can look through the various good things that happened in history. Again, this includes both the church and outside of the church. We can look at how people banded together in very difficult times and were able to not just survive, but to be able to thrive and to make a difference for good in the world. So that's another reason why why I happen to really love history. We can also be inspired by the events or individuals in history. We can look at a specific thing that took place. We can look at a specific historical figure and say, wow, I really resonate with what went on there. Learning about that event or learning about that person makes me want to be a better person. And so I looked to these historical events, I looked to these historical figures, and I try to apply that. I try to learn how I can be a better person, how I can learn from who they were. Studying history also helps us to see that we're part of a big picture. It's hard for us to understand that. The immediate situation is the focus of everything. It's what is happening today, what is happening this week, or maybe this month. If we're really farsighted, we might see what is happening during the year. But how does that fit with what happened through the decade, or the century, or the millennium? Everything that is happening, whether we're talking about church history or we're talking about history in general, we're all connected to other events that have happened. And when we study history, we get a sense of that big picture that we are a part of. And as a Christian, as someone who loves church history, I really appreciate seeing that my little church that I'm pastoring in, that has been around for getting close to 200 years, that is just one small part of what God has been doing through the universal church for almost 2,000 years. And so that is one of the reasons why I love history. And then the final reason is that history is really, really interesting. I find it so fascinating. I do watch and read fiction, but you know what? There are things that happen in history that are so much more interesting and entertaining and shocking than anything that a novelist or a movie producer could come up with. History has some of the most interesting figures and events. Unexpected things happen. All of this stuff that we could never imagine, that we could never put together just through our own ability to write stories. History brings these things together, and we can learn so much. And we can enjoy that learning. It's not just an academic discipline, it's something that we can actually have an incredible amount of enjoyment. And I think that's one of the reasons why history for a long time has been a part of my life. And so that is 5 reasons why I love history. And before I go, I just want to plug a couple of podcasts that I produce, which are both history related. And one is called The History of Christianity, and you can find it at historyofchristianitypodcast.com. I know I'm super creative. You would never have guessed that that was the URL for that podcast. And I also have a podcast on the history of the Second World War. I'm really interested in military history, especially the Second World War. I find that time so fascinating, and I'm actually trying to figure out a way to do a crossover between the history of Christianity and the Second World War one, and I have a couple of ideas how I'm going to do that. So you can find that the episodes for that at my website. Go to stephenjbedard.com/Second World War, and you can find the podcast as well as some blog posts that are on that topic. I would love to hear from you. What aspects of history do you like? And what is it about history that makes you interested in it? Please come and check me out at my website, stephenjbedard.com. Thank you for watching this, and God bless.